Excuse me.
Who feels tired every so often? Yeah, all right. What about running out of energy? All right. So our guest speaker, Dr. Hanna, has just published, this just came out a week ago, and the book is called Recharge. And she's passionate about it. She's dedicated her career to research how we can recharge our bodies and not eat instead of recharging the way we're supposed to. So we are so happy to have you here and listen to what you have to tell us. Let me tell you a little bit about her. If I can read, I don't have my glasses with me. So, New York Times bestseller, author Heidi Hanna is an international consultant on health and performance initiatives for individuals and organizations. She has been featured at many national and global conferences, including the Fortune magazine Most Powerful Women in Business Summit, the $1 Million Roundtable, and the ESPN Women's Leadership Summit. Her publications include The Sharp Solution, Stressaholic, and now Recharge. So, enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So a little secret that I did not put on the back of the book is I've actually written 4 books, as you all know, because I mentioned one of them to you. I just don't actively promote it because it was kind of a side project for me. But to refresh your memory, if you didn't catch that, I also wrote a book called Relax Your Fat Off. And if you want it, all you have to do is send me an email and I will send you the PDF. It's really honestly just something I did for fun. It's based on my dissertation, which I did when I was getting my doctorate on stress management and weight management. And as I shared, it was a big part of my journey. The whole reason I got into this work was because I was so frustrated with my own struggles with weight. And so I started studying the brain. I actually went to Rollins College in Orlando for my master's program. I went to Penn State for undergrad, went to Rollins for my master's. So I lived in Orlando for 10 years. It's great to be back in the area. This is my first time really spending time in Jacksonville, though, so I'm really pleased and honored to be here. I met Donna Orander last year at a PGA event, and her energy was so contagious to me that I didn't really care what she was doing. I just wanted to be a part of it. So, which is probably why a lot of you are here. It's like, if you're doing it, I'm so in. So that's literally how this came to be about. I flew here from San Diego just to speak with all of you, and I have been blown away by what we've already experienced together. And I can tell you that you are giving me more than I could ever give you, just in the energy you're sharing. So I'm grateful to be here. Can you all hear me okay? I feel like I'm kind of shouting, so okay. I feel like they put us in a corner or something. Like, let's put the stressaholics back where no one can see them. And please come on in. There's people still kind of filing in. Feel free to come in. I want to keep this fairly informal, and I want to have a conversation about this. If you're a little bit confused as to the topic and the title change, this is designed to talk about energy management. So I wrote a book last year called Stressaholic. When I realized I was addicted to stress, I decided to write a book about it because that's what stress addicts do. They just find more stressful things. And I'll tell you my experience that made me realize that. I had been teaching work-life balance and teaching energy management. I have a PhD in holistic nutrition. I've had training in exercise physiology and neuroscience. And so I know all of the things that we should be doing. And my 2 biggest fears at the time were speaking, public speaking, and flying. And so I started traveling the world talking about energy management and literally breaking down because I was so stressed out with what I was doing. And that's where, as I shared with you all today, and by the way, that's the first time I've shared that publicly, that I was saying one thing and doing something very different. It was a very, very lonely lifestyle. And the reason I share it now is because I think there's a lot of us dealing with those same pressures. And if we just knew that the rest of us were out there, it wouldn't feel so lonely. So I feel grateful that I've been able to share that piece of my story with all of you. But I decided that something had to change. I was actually having panic attacks that were putting me in the hospital. And I knew that if I was going to keep doing this energy output, that I had to drastically change my energy input. And that's when I started getting massage. And I remember building time into my work where if I was at a nice hotel, I would stay an extra day or two and try to relax. Well, I remember this one time I was in Napa Valley, which was awesome for work, to go to Napa Valley. And there was a spa, and so I went into the spa, and I decided I was going to really practice relaxation. And so, fortunate for me, there was a sign on the wall that said step by step how to relax. It was like, sit in this tub for this long, and then go into this steam, and then do this spa thing. And I was like, this is perfect. All I have to do is follow along with the guide. And so I did the first part. I sat in the jacuzzi, and I think I was supposed to sit there for 3 minutes. And it wasn't 30 seconds. I was so miserable. And all I wanted to do was check my email or like write a book or do a blog. Or it was like this craving that I had to contribute. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to have that sort of passion and purpose. I did not pick this career, obviously. I feel like I was called to it. And yet, when we function at that level, we can become neurochemically addicted to being on all of the time. And so I've really been diving into the research on this and looking at things like technology addiction. You know, there is something that happens when our phone vibrates or gives us a signal that actually releases a dopamine response, which is in the reward center of our brain, and tells us this could be something good. The interesting thing is, even if it's bad, our brain wants us to be on high alert. So it doesn't really matter if it's good or it's bad. It still gives us that rush. And so I watch people, and I was watching you all even today, and it's hard not to do this, but how many people are paying attention to what's going on and multitasking at the same time? I wasn't asking you, but thanks for raising your hands. I literally wasn't. It was like, see, you're in the right room. I'm a stressaholic. You all just were raising your hands. I was just kind of pointing in that direction, but that was awesome.
I was just putting your books in my Amazon.
You were just, okay, so everybody, if you need to tweet something, get it out of your system. So here I was listening this morning, I did the same thing. Because I'm like, but I want to connect with people. As women, we want to connect. So I was trying to tweet, and I was taking pictures. But what happens is, as we're paying attention, and we think that we're paying attention, we're momentarily distracted to do something else. And that distraction trains our brain to be distracted. And so it's no wonder that we have a higher incidence of ADD, ADHD. I've actually had my brain scanned, and my brain scan shows that I have diagnosable ADD, OCD, depression, and anxiety disorder. I actually don't think that that's just because I was born that way. Some of that certainly was genetic. But I think a lot of it was, as I was growing up, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure that I was always under to perform at these high levels. And it's wonderful to have opportunities to do that. But we have to be very careful about the message we're sending our brain and how we're training ourselves. Because everything we do and everything we think creates neural pathways in the brain. And the more we do that, the more those things solidify. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, is this idea of recharging ourselves and how important that is. And I'm going to talk about that from both a brain and a body perspective. And the first thing I want to kind of point out, once I turn this on, and I talk about this actually in all of my books, is this idea of the brain and the heart and how the two work together. Now, for a long time, I was very brain focused. And I talked about how the brain is like a CFO of an organization. So it's constantly judging how many resources you have to spend. So you get up in the morning and you decide you're going to eat healthy, and your diet's perfect for the first part of the day because you have decent energy and things are planned out. And so your diet's good, but then you go to lunch and you're busy or you're multitasking or you don't take time for yourself. And by the end of the day, the diet isn't even on the table anymore. It's shocking to me how I planned to have a salad and yet end up with a hamburger and fries and a chocolate shake. And the message that my brain is telling me is, you deserve this. You haven't taken any time for yourself today. You know, you're under a lot of pressure. It's circumstantial. You'll do better tomorrow. Has anybody else had those messages, right? Now, this is why I call your brain your frenemy. Because your brain is helping you, but it's hurting you at the same time. It actually thinks that because you're not taking time to recharge your battery, you're running on empty. If you go longer than 4 hours without eating at some point during the day, you've now told your brain that you're in a state of deprivation. Now, here's a funny thing. We were talking about exercise in the panel. let's say you get up in the morning, you didn't get a good night's sleep, you're on a diet, and you go work out. That is deprivation. Your brain does not understand why you would voluntarily spend energy. So now, from a stress perspective, imagine this. Food has run out, and you're being chased by a bear. That's basically how your brain perceives a diet and exercise program. It's the worst thing that you can do unless you're doing it in a way that matches what the brain and body desire, which is that oscillation pattern. I mentioned that in the panel. Everything about the human system is designed to have a pulse, which means I am fully engaged with you all right now for the next 45 minutes, but the only way I can do that is to take 10 to 15 minutes prior for myself to prepare for how I want to present myself with the best energy for the next 45 minutes. And to take 10 to 15 minutes afterwards to process that and allow that to settle in before I go to the next thing. But most of you are going hour after hour after hour after hour without any time to even catch up, let alone show up fully. So here's a question. How many of you have shown up to a meeting or a presentation just like this, where physically you've been sitting in the chair, spending your time, but your brain was somewhere else? Raise your hand if you've done it. This is how I can tell if you're paying attention. Because if you're not raising your hand, you're looking at the person next to you saying, well, what did she just ask? Because you were thinking about something else. Because we've all done that before. And again, what I want you to consider is that you're training yourself to do this by constantly multitasking. And the female brain, by the way, is hardwired to multitask more effectively, which for years we have thought was a good thing. It's actually one of the most hazardous things for your health. Because multitasking increases stress hormones in the brain. It causes you to be less attentive to what's going on in the moment. It's basically causing extra wear and tear on your system. And we do that because we want to take care of everybody else, right? Here's something fascinating. The stress response that we hear most about is called what? You know what the stress response is called? Okay, fight or flight, right? That is a masculine stress response. Does anyone know what the female or feminine stress response is? It's actually called tend or befriend. You haven't heard about it a lot, and unfortunately, it took some digging, but I realized the reason we've done so much research on men is primarily because they're easier to study, which is kind of funny, but they're less complicated. They compartmentalize things. Have you ever tried to talk to a guy where he's watching a football game? He can't. You know, it's like you actually, and I've heard this from communications experts, they say if you want to talk to a man, make an appointment. Literally say, if it's about feelings especially, we need to talk. When would a good time be for you to talk about that? And that's a much better way to do it. And the interesting thing is that's also very self-protecting. We would all be better if we did that, which doesn't mean that we can't have open conversation. But we have to be protective about our time and energy in a way that our energy is fully focused on what matters most in that moment, which again requires oscillation. So the only way you can fully invest is to be able to disengage when you need to recharge your battery. So the brain is processing resources, and the heart is processing emotion. And the emotional cues that the brain receives happen much faster than our thoughts. And as I started to learn this, I realized the power of the heart in training the brain to think differently. So what I want to share with you is something I learned from an organization called Heart Math. And if you're interested in any of this, I would highly recommend you check out heartmath.org. or heartmath.com. The .org site is their research site. They have a free book called Science of the Heart, which is amazing, especially if you're a nerd and you like research like I do. I mean, it scientifically validates what we know about the energy of the heart. In fact, the energy of the heart will expand outside of your body at least 3 feet, potentially even greater, but that's as far as we can measure. The energy outside of your brain expands for an inch. So what you think has an impact on your environment, but what you feel has a huge impact on your environment. And it makes sense because from a survival perspective, we need to feel the state of our tribe in order to know whether we can relax or not. Have any of you ever been in a situation where someone walks in and you just feel stressed because they're there? And it's not necessarily because they're your boss or something. They just carry, like the Tasmanian devil, they just like bring in all this stress. Have you ever noticed yourself starting to pick that up? Stress is the most contagious thing known to man. In fact, we can pass it through email, through text, through phone calls. We pick up subtle cues from somebody else that says, you have a reason to be stressed right now. And then we feel it, and it impacts our body. And so we start to experience that same wear and tear. Now, here's where I think it's exciting, and what I want to teach you about is the power of the heart to change that. So if you look at this, and this isn't to make it complicated, but our autonomic nervous system it controls our stress response and our relaxation response. So simply put, we have the sympathetic, which is the kind of stressful piece of that, which causes us to have an increase in heart rate, an increase in breath rate, increase in cortisol and other hormones. And then we have the parasympathetic, which slows that down. Well, the sympathetic, which is fascinating to me, is controlled 80 to 90% by the brain, which means whether or not you experience stress is based primarily on what you think, how you perceive the world around you. But the other side of it, the relaxation response, is controlled 80 to 90% by the heart. So stress communicates top down, and relaxation communicates bottom up. And the reason I think that's important is it fits everything else I'm talking about with oscillation. That you can think about things. Have you ever tried to think your way out of being stressed about something? How's that work? It doesn't work. So I have a lot of friends who are positive psychologists, and we debate this all the time because I'm like, look, I've struggled with clinical depression since I was 12. It's not that I didn't want to be happy. It's not that I didn't think all of those thoughts or try to change the way I was seeing the world. It's not that I was ungrateful for my life. I was so grateful. In fact, that made it worse. So like, how am I depressed when I have such a great life? It was torturous. But what I realized was it was my emotional state, it was my physical state that was really causing my brain to perceive the world around me differently. So the reason that this is good news is we can feel our way into a different state of thinking. So let's actually practice that right now. I'm going to give you the quickest, easiest exercise. It's only going to take a couple of minutes. It's perfect because you just had a meal, so it's going to help you digest that food better, get rid of those stress hormones that are going to try to cause you to store that as fat. And so I want you to do me a favor and just close your eyes for a moment. Now, closing your eyes immediately starts to trigger the relaxation response. So if there's nothing else you can do, closing your eyes gets rid of the stimulation around you and starts to quiet the noise. Now, if you're ever in a situation where you can't close your eyes and you want to do this exercise, you can do it with your eyes open, but it does take a little bit of practice. So I always encourage practicing with your eyes closed. So what I want you to do, the first step is something you're already doing, and that is breathe. But pay attention to your breath. Notice your breath. See what you notice about your breath. How does the air feel? How does your chest feel as it expands and contracts? Breathing is something we often take for granted, and when we get stressed, we get into a short, shallow breathing process that just in itself triggers stress. So as you bring your attention to your breath, naturally it should slow down. You don't really have to force that. And what we're doing is we're shifting from thoughts to feelings. So keeping your attention and awareness on your breath, I want you to now think about something that you feel grateful for. It could be a person, a place, your health. Anything that you feel grateful for, I want you to really picture that or visualize that. And see if you can notice a shift in how your body feels. What does gratitude feel like in your body? And just like training a muscle, we're training our brain to remember what it feels like to appreciate something. and trying to hold that state of being, the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is focus your attention on one word that describes you when you're at your best. What is one word that when you are just on, this would describe you? I want you to see that word, feel that word, and commit just for the next 20 minutes or so to showing up being that version of yourself. And you're going to take just a couple more breaths before we come back. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. You guys look amazing. This better version of you is way better than what I saw before. I'm just kidding. So I call that my BFF. My BFF process is breathe, feel, focus. And what we did is start connecting the brain and the heart by feeling the emotion of gratitude. And lots of studies have shown that just gratitude in itself starts to change the dynamic and trigger that relaxation response. And it doesn't have to take long. It's something you can do anytime, anywhere. And there's other techniques to do that too. So the whole reason I wrote the new book, Recharge, is because so many people would ask me, well, what do I do when I take these breaks? You want me to take more breaks? What do I do? So it's really figuring out what works for you. But I'll tell you, aromatherapy, music, watching funny videos, humor is an amazing way to reconnect the brain and body. In fact, I started a nonprofit called Beyond Funny where we teach people about the benefits of healthy humor for the brain. And so humor has been shown to decrease cortisol and to improve longevity and actually even enhance memory in the elderly. So we know humor is a great tool, but most people don't intentionally seek out humor. I actually do that as one of the 5 things I do every single morning, to try to get my brain into a state that prepares me to see the world the way I want to see the world. But for most people, the first thing that they do when they get up in the morning is think, I don't have enough time to get it all done. I got too much stress. I've got too much things going on. Or they check their email, or they watch the news. Most of the time, that's not very positive. So the brain in its most vulnerable state first thing in the morning gets into a stress mode and gets stuck there most of the time. So I want to show you a quick little video here that's going to illustrate some of this. And all you need to do is just watch the video, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. So did you notice anything interesting? I assume that you noticed it was the same exact video both times. Did you experience them differently? So this is what I consider our inner soundtrack. And it was my comment back to one of the questions about saying I didn't have time to sleep, or I don't have time to do that, or I don't have time to meditate, or I can't take care of myself because I need to take care of everybody else. It's that soundtrack that we're telling ourselves that's fueling our response to the world around us. And it's important to rewrite that script. About stress. You know, stress is interesting. Stress is just a stimulus for change. That's it. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And 2 people can be in the exact same situation. And one perceives it as a challenge. And they produce primarily adrenaline hormone, which is actually has a short lifespan in the body and isn't toxic. The other person sees it as a threat or they don't feel like they have the resources they need to deal with it, it's cortisol that's produced. And that's a more long-term stress situation. And that's the one that kills brain cells and causes inflammation and all sorts of damage. In fact, 75 to 90% of medical visits are stress-related. So this is a big problem. Now, I always kind of laugh about this because I'm going to tell you that stress kills you, and how does that make you feel? Like stress, so great. So the good thing is there's something we can do about that, and that's what I want to spend the rest of our time on. So this idea of energy management for me is holistic. It's inside out. It's looking at physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, social energy, and how we give that out and how we also receive that. And so one of the reasons food and movement and sleep are so important to me is that is the core of your energy capacity. The only way you can have the energy you need to deal with the day is to actually have glucose and oxygen for your cells to make energy. If you're not doing that, then you're starting off with an energy deficit. Around the age of 30, our energy capacity goes down. I'm sure that's not shocking to any of you. The good news is we can do something about that. So that's only if you're not doing something actively to train your energy to work better for you. And again, I want to remind you that this is not about having amazing energy all the time nonstop, because that is not possible. Does anyone know what the best way cardiovascularly is to exercise? Interval training. By far the best way for your heart. Also burns the most calories. It also increases the creation of new brain cells. I mentioned that earlier, neurogenesis. You could not sustain that high level of exercise for a long period of time. You can do it in short spurts. And I want you to think about that when you think about your life, living like a sprinter instead of a marathoner. If you get up, and Donna, who is moderating the panel, and I were both done marathons, when you're doing a marathon, you just think, I just got to conserve my energy. Like, you can't see the finish line. You just don't want to do anything that's going to cost too much energy. And that's how a lot of people spend their day. They're just going through the motions because they don't have enough to give fully. As opposed to a sprinter who sees the finish line, they can work hard for a short period of time. In fact, you know when everybody does their best work is right before vacation. Right before vacation, you're an animal. You're like, I can get anything done now, right? Because you know that break is coming. Imagine what it would look like if every hour you had a mini vacation. I know it's not quite the same. But my question would be, do you think you could get more done in less time if you had extraordinary energy? I got to tell you a great little story. I used to work at a company called the Human Performance Institute down in Orlando. And it's where a lot of my initial understanding of energy management came from. And there was a story that my mentor, Dr. Lair, used to tell about what we call the 9 o'clock dad. And there was a guy that would come home every night at 6:30, and he made a commitment to his family to be there, no matter what it took. It was stressful to get home at that time, but he always made sure he was there. And one night he couldn't get home until 9 o'clock. So he came in and he kissed his wife and talked to her about her day. And he went into the living room where the kids were watching TV, and normally his wife would take care of the kids and get them ready for bed. But he went in and he played with them on the floor for a little while, wrestled around with them. He took them upstairs and gave them a bedtime bath, and then took them into their room, tucked them in, read them a bedtime story. And right before he turned the light off, his youngest son said, "Hey, Dad, could you come home at 9 o'clock every night?" And I think, especially for those of you in here who are mothers or parents, you recognize the value of what that says. What people, especially your children, but what people want most from you is your attention. I love a story my friend would say. He'd say he was talking to his daughter, and his daughter would say, "Listen to me, Daddy." And he said, "I am listening." And she took his face and turned it to him and said, "Listen with your eyes." I just thought that was so precious. So kids are good at doing that, but you know what? We all want each other's attention. How many of you have been on the phone with someone and you can tell they're doing something else? Or driving behind someone and you can tell they're doing something else? Flying used to be my biggest fear. It's now driving. No joke. I turned the radio off. I am totally paying attention because the things I see, try it sometime. Just kind of watch what's going on around you. Don't get distracted. But it's pretty frightening what people are doing while they drive, something that's very important to pay attention to. Texting while driving is obviously an issue. Now we have texting while crossing the street, and people are getting killed. It's unbelievable. So obviously there are life and death consequences of multitasking, But it's more than that. It's also how we show up, and it's how we exhaust ourselves. So I'm going to show you one more quick little video here.
What's better, doing two things at once or just one? You sure?
I am absolutely positive. Two times is awesome. The thing I can do is wave my head and wave.
I've never seen anything like that. Hold on, I'm watching this. It's not complicated. Doing two things at once is better. And only AT&T's network lets you talk.
Okay, so the question, what was the question? What's better? Doing two things at once or one? So I'm going to ask you the same question. How many of you think doing two things at once is better? How many of you want to raise your hand, but you know I'm going to say that's wrong? Yeah? Because some of your shoulders were like, why wouldn't I do two things and get more done in less time, right? But the brain can't do two things at once, and you should know that by now. We can't. So what are we doing? We're flipping back and forth between two different things. We're wasting time, we're wasting energy, and we're increasing stress hormones. But we still do it, and we all do it. And I know this more than anybody, and I still find myself drawn to do it. And that is that stress addiction. It is that technology addiction. It is performance addiction, needing to be on all the time, needing to be connected. And we have to remind ourselves. In fact, I have a wristband on that says, I'd rather be extraordinary at less than ordinary at more. And that's a personal mantra that I've been using this year to remind myself I can't do everything I want to do. And as your passion and your purpose increase, it's more difficult, not less, to say no. Because how could I not go do this and help people? But we have to keep reminding ourselves, and that's why I think as community together it's so important, is we can encourage each other. When someone says, you know, when you see someone's battery running out, or someone says, I'm going to try to take care of myself, do it together and support each other in that. Because like I said before, and I made light of it, but when I say I get a massage every week, I know people are judging me. Because it feels like, you know, oh, must be nice. Well, you know, I make other choices. There's a lot of things I don't spend my money on so that I can afford to do that. It's a choice. So we need to talk about it, support each other in doing that. So what I'd like to do is actually an exercise so that you have some takeaway things as a result of this. And this is going to be what we kind of end with, and then I'll take questions. But on the back of your handout, if you have a pen, hopefully you have a pen with you. If you don't, you can go back and do this at a later time. There's numbers 1 through 5. I'm going to give you what I consider the 5 most important shifts. I say that carefully, no joke. The person who was laying out my new book spelled that wrong. I said shift happens. And she spelled it wrong, and I did like a screenshot and blasted it out on social media. I thought it was hysterical. But see, there's that healthy humor thing is good, right? Shift happens if we make it happen. So 5 shifts that you can make in your day to have more energy. Now, what I want you to do first is you'll see there that there's a line, and it says AM and PM. I want you to write down what time you typically get up in the morning and what time you typically go to bed. And I know it may change, but just give yourself a number. Not what you want to do or what you think you should do, but what you actually do. What time you get up and what time you go to bed. Let's say weekday, since there's more of those. Yes, I have mine. Giselle, does anyone else need a handout? Okay, Giselle, do you mind? Yeah, as I say, you certainly can have mine, and then we'll pass some more up. Do you mind just passing that back so we get a receiver there? Okay, so you're going to write down the time you get up in the morning and the time you go to bed. Data point number 1 is bedtime. And what I want you to consider first and foremost is from the time you go to bed to the time you get up in the morning, are you even allowing 8 hours? Well, guess what? You're not going to get 8 hours of sleep if you don't even allow that to happen. What do you think is more likely, getting up earlier or going to bed earlier? Now, I know a lot of you are like, neither. Okay, but if you had to choose one, right? Usually we're not going to get up earlier. Usually the only thing we can adjust and realize, I know everybody's in different circumstances, but this is so critical. It's why I'm starting with it first. Sleep impacts everything about what you do. It changes the hormones that are flooding through your system. It changes the way that your brain can wire new information, how you retain information, how you use that information. And a lack of sleep stimulates the stress response. Now, giving yourself 8 hours is the first step. I know a lot of people would say, I can't fall asleep. Do any of you go to bed tired and wired at the same time? So you're so tired, you can't shut off your brain. The other shifts we talk about are going to help you to sleep more effectively. But the first thing I want you to consider is giving yourself the time. And then also, what do you do before bed? Are you shifting into a more relaxed state so that you can sleep? Number one rule is turning off technology at least an hour before bed, at least. Technology is stimulating. Most of us have what I call as soon as syndrome. Right? As soon as this happens, as soon as that happens, as soon as that happens, then I'll take care of myself, then I'll go to sleep. Or one more thing. I'll just do one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. It's not going to happen. You check your email to send one quick note and 10 other ones are there, you're just going to read real quick. It just never goes away. It's a vicious cycle, and now your brain's active. So bedtime with regards to the time you're giving yourself, but also what I call bedtime prep time. And if you need it, this may sound ridiculous, but try it. Set an alarm for when you need to prepare for bed. Think of it just like getting ready in the morning. How much time do you need to unwind? And set an alarm to say, if you want to go to sleep at 10, set an alarm for 9 that just says, okay, from here on out, no technology. I'm going to try to do something relaxing. I know it's not always possible, but at least mentally you're setting an intention to create a shift, which is the first step. So bedtime is critical. The second thing then is your morning ritual. So I told you before, first thing in the morning, your brain is vulnerable to receiving new information, and it's going to set up the lens through which you see the world for the rest of the day. So what do you do within the first 30 minutes of getting up? Other than pee or whatever, you know. Is it relaxing? Is it intentional? Are you thinking about who you want to be before you think about what you want to do? Are you thinking about that word that you came up with that was you at your best, that you wake up and intentionally think that? Now, by the way, if you didn't get any sleep, you're waking up in a stressed state, it's probably not going to happen that way, which is why I put sleep first. If you're sleeping better and you wake up and you intentionally focus on something positive, that's going to change your perspective for the rest of the day. So how do you do that? You don't just magically start seeing things better. Create a ritual. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. That's one easy way to do it. Every single morning. I did this, it changed my life. Write down 3 things you're grateful for is one. Listen to music that's inspiring to you, or read something that's inspirational. I'm doing a practice now where every morning I read a lesson for the day. So whether that's religious or spiritual or just inspirational, you're filling your brain with the nourishment it needs from a mental perspective before you start giving energy away. And that's really important. So that's what I call the bookends for the day. How you prepare for sleep and how you prepare your brain for the day ahead. The next 3 are things you already know, but I'm going to remind you. Number 3 is nourishment, nutrition, food. So if you look at that line, when are you eating during the day? Are you eating at least every 3 to 4 hours? Everything on that chart now should look like an oscillation. So every 3 to 4 hours you're eating something. Ideally something with a balance of carbohydrate and protein and healthy fat so that you're not spiking and crashing. If you need more resources on that kind of stuff, I can certainly help you as far as what types of things to choose. But for now, the important thing is setting an intentional time to eat. And I know this is difficult for a lot of people. Try to just eat when you're eating. How many of you eat at your desk? Yeah. So work is not relaxing, so you've got these stress hormones flooding your brain and telling your body you're in an emergency situation. And guess what the most valuable resource is for your body if you're in an emergency situation? Fat, protection. So you don't even have to eat that much, and your brain is thinking, hold on to this, because I don't know what's going on. Bear's chasing us, food's running out, I don't know what's going on, but something's not right here. Meanwhile, in your head, you're like, this is just what I deal with every day. So you're getting this every single day. So eat every 3 to 4 hours. The number 4 thing is movement, and not just exercise, but how do you move? You should move at least every 90 minutes. the higher the stress, the more you need to move. So I recommend people move at least every hour. So if you start chunking your day into these shorter sprints, what you'll find is these things can all work together. If you can schedule your day where you're working for 50 minutes would be beautiful if you could do it. If not, 55 minutes, whatever you have to do. A shorter period of time with an intentional break that allows you to get nutrition, move if you need to, and the last one, which is mental breaks. Perfect timing. You know, we're in logical, analytical task mode the majority of the day. And so when I talk about brain training, people will think, well, I'm using my brain all day. But that's like doing, you know, chest press the whole time at the gym. You're working out one muscle that's actually overtrained, and you're not training the other things. So what about creativity and intuition and reflection? Now, this is one of those areas where as women, we're really blessed because we can multitask and we can think holistically. Women in leadership, this is going to be a huge area of growth. And it's so exciting to see it happen because we do take in all of the pieces. When we're in a relaxed state, we can look at the whole picture and we can hear different perspectives and come up with an intuitive or insightful idea from that, as opposed to being compartmentalized. But the only way you have access to your whole brain is through relaxing. When do you have your best ideas? Bathroom, there's a new one. Yeah, okay, shower, that's more familiar. Okay, shower, bathroom, working out, getting a massage, dry, usually when you're not trying. I found mine was massage. It's another reason I justify it. I wrote books getting massage because the ideas just came together in new ways. So that relaxation response happened, my brain could communicate more effectively across those channels. So my question to you then would be, what shift are you going to incorporate immediately? Starting now, starting today. You're getting a lot of information, a lot of stimulation, a lot of inspiration to do new things and live with passion. How are you going to sustain that? And so think about that. Is it going to be a bedtime ritual, a morning ritual, nutrition shifts, movement, mental breaks, meditation? I mentioned earlier, if you say you don't have time to meditate, I'm here to tell you you don't have time not to, because it changes everything about the way that your day works. In May, I'm going to do a free training called, it's a 21-day mindset makeover for people who have never meditated and want to learn. It's kind of like learning to work out. It'll be 5 minutes a day for the first week, and then 10 minutes a day for the second week, and then 15. Because when I first tried to learn meditation, I drove myself crazy. I was like, there's no way I can do this. You can. You can do a lot more than you think you can, but you have to train in smaller sections and have some guidance. So if that's something you're interested in, please send me a note. I'll add you to the list. Also, as I mentioned, I'm going to make that book, Relax Your Fat Off, in a PDF. I'll just email it to you if you want to send me an email about that. This is part of the process we kind of went through earlier with the breathe, feel, focus. I also refer to it as balance, build, boost. What you're doing is balancing brain chemistry, building brain health, and boosting brain power. So I just want to leave you with this, and hopefully we have a couple minutes for questions. My email address, my website. I know we have some copies of the book out front. Literally, this is the first week I've seen it, so it's that new. We're going to actually be revising it. We're just going to make it smaller. That was a big thing for me. I'm like, I want it to be as few words as I need to say to get the message across. I want to make it really easy for people to understand, because there's already way too much information out there for us. We need to understand how to apply it. And that's what I hope to do. Also, I'll just mention on my website, there's a free brain gym that has brain training games that you can play if you want. There's a relaxation exercise. There's free audio. We're actually doing a recharge cleanse starting on Wednesday, April 1st, no fooling. And so if you're interested in that, you can send me an email. It's a free manual. There's videos every day. A big part of it for me, though, is not as much what you're putting in your body, but what you're putting in your brain, because that will affect how you digest what you put in your body. So I'm going to stop here, even though I could go on and on and on and on, because I know we're almost out of time, and I'd love to take questions if we have some. I think, did you have a question? Yes, please.
Did you ever have any fear or hesitation about giving up your stress? Because when you are stressed, you know it helps you at your job and be productive and get a lot done. It's almost
Yes.
like wanting to give it up. Is there any help you?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So if anyone couldn't hear that, she said, did you ever have fear or hesitation about giving up your stress? I still have it. You're never going to give it up. It's never going to completely go away. What I want you to think about is being intentional about it. That the more stress I have, the more recovery I need. I actually travel more now than I did before. I'm writing books, I'm doing more than I did before, but I'm intentionally taking downtime to fuel myself, because it's not the stress that's harmful, it's the lack of energy to deal with the stress. And realize as well that that's not sustainable. That rush that you get from waiting till the last minute, just wait until you wake up one morning and you don't get the rush. Is anyone at that point yet? Chronic fatigue, any of that kind of stuff? So I went from running marathons to not being able to run for 30 seconds on a treadmill. So if you hit that actual burnout process, you have no choice but change it. My goal is to teach people that by strategically doing that and creating those investment times, you can keep yourself from ever hitting that burnout, and you can be more sustainable. It is about making choices and being able to look and say, okay, I've only got 24 hours in the day. I need to sleep for 8 of those, and that's a priority. So where am I going to show up, and when am I going to disengage? So you can actually do more in less time. It is a rewiring of our thought process, though. We also, as a society, need to change this crappy story that says the more stressed we are, the more important we are. It's so ridiculous. And literally, catch yourself before you say that. When someone says, how are you doing? Usually it's busy, stressed, tired. Just say great. Just pretend. Seriously, because you know what? It becomes this fight. I got 3 hours of sleep. I only got 2 hours of sleep. Oh, you must be more important than I am. It's so stupid. So we have to kind of create that shift, and then it's going to be easier to not feel like we have to be on all the time. Yes, and then I'll come to you. Yes?
I saw you at the Wells Fargo Women's Conference.
Yes, yes, I do.
And I was so impressed. I was just like, oh, she's young, she's beautiful, she's got a PhD, she has this great exercise program, great kit with the band.
Yeah, the Dynaband. Oh, yeah.
So I have one
Good.
travel bag and at home.
Great.
And I went back and I told everybody in the office about you, about how incredible you.
Is anyone else like nervous right now about where this is going? Because I'm like, okay. There's no but, right? I'm like, okay.
I spent about, a day or two committing to your program and went back in the thing. And 2 years ago, I wound up in the hospital with my autonomic nervous system dead. I mean, you don't get 6 days in the hospital if you're having a heart transplant. So
Yeah,
it was bad.
wow.
So, sorry, I got short of breath there. The most incredible thing that I think about you now is that you disclosed what you struggle with. I think that's just so brave and amazing because you didn't have to do that, and I want to thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you make me cry. Thank you. Thank you. I sense that if we can talk more openly, then we can take some of the pressure off. Because I was in disordered behavior then, I remember.
You did it very well.
Well, thank you. So, we all have our things, and I don't say that to promote that. We all have coping mechanisms for things. But I think if we keep showing up and pretending to be perfect, it's ridiculous. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that very much.
I'm going to sound so petty now. Just a couple of quick things.
Yeah.
I've been trying to meditate. I find it incredibly hard. Like, I'm that person who, when they ask you if you want a scalp massage in the salon, I'm like, no, don't touch my head. Just like, leave me alone. But there's 2 great free apps and I think they're both on Android and on iPhone. There's one called Calm.
Yes, Calm is a good app.
Really good and really free.
Really free. We love free.
Yeah. I think I like that one better than the other one. But they're all,
Yeah.
they're very, 5 minutes. It's a great guided meditation.
There's a lot of great apps out there. And again, the key is not having the technology, it's doing it.
Yeah.
Because I remember things where I'd be like, I can hit snooze on the, pretty much anything that reminds you, so.
The other thing is that somebody said something to me earlier this year that I don't even remember who it is, but it's sort of become a little bit of a mantra for me, which is make a deposit, not a withdrawal. And just thinking about people in your life and situations in your life, are they making a deposit or are they depleting you in any way? And the last thing is really more of a question. So you talked about how the brain and energy changes as you get older.
Yeah.
My 18-year-old seems very capable of multitasking. Is that even possible, or is it just the way that, especially kids who are so used to being, encouraged to do so many different things at once?
So I'm going to say this fairly quickly because I want to get you guys out of here. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, which is depressing. But that's one of the scariest comments I get from people. There's a great book. It's a little intense. It's called The Shallows, which talks about what technology and the internet is doing to our brain. And it's basically the concept of our level of depth has gone from being able to have deep connections and process information deeply to having this wide breadth of stuff. What concerns me the most about it is, yes, they can do it better, but there's damage being done. And if you look at the generations coming up who are constantly multitasking, there's no social connection. It's very strange. And I think we're going to suffer from that for a while. I also think we're going to see an increase in mental illness, substance abuse, suicide, because of the taxing that takes. Studies have shown the more time you spend on Facebook, the greater your levels of depression. And this is not to say social media is bad. Go use social media intentionally for what it's designed, and then get off of it. The problem is people are on it all the time, and they need it, and they need that feedback. And so it scares me. And I think the best we can do is kind of control our own use, be a good example of that. And if you're a parent, set some boundaries. The only thing I can relate to this is I wanted to eat ice cream for dinner, and my parents wouldn't let me. I think that technology and multitasking is worse than eating ice cream for dinner because of the damage it's doing. So we have to be able to say, yes, you can have access to that, but within these boundaries and within these limits, or else I think we are killing, damaging brains. Okay, just because your hand is so high, and then this is the last one, and I'm so sorry. BFF is breathe, feel, focus.
And another thing, I have an issue with, of course, stress.
Yes.
But it seems that I work well under
Yes.
pressure.
Yes.
Waiting to the last minute in the deadline, and I don't understand it.
Yep.
You have a bunch of time you procrastinate, and then when it gets down to the wire, it's like,
Yep.
I seem to get it done, but it's not good.
And so we all have that, and when you have it every now and then, it's not a problem. If you have a moment and you've got to get something done and you've got adrenaline and you're going to get it done, it actually enhances productivity and performance. The problem is you cannot sustain that. So yes, it will help you now, but long term it will kill you and kill your productivity and destroy your brain. So I think an awareness of that, and my solution for that is create smaller mini rushes for yourself. So instead of it being 6 months out and I'm going to wait for 6 months to get it done, what little mini goal could you set for yourself to have a sense of accomplishment that breaks that up into smaller pieces, if that makes sense? But again, I think it's really an awareness and an intentionality that what you're doing is addictive to your brain because it thinks it's helping you, but it's not sustainable. And the only way that we're really going to be able to make a difference is to have sustainable energy so that we can really live the course of what we all want to accomplish together. So thank you all so, so much for coming to my session. Thank you.